Quite often in our programming we encounter a situation like this where we want to construct an output or some sort of sentence combining a string literal, so a fixed piece of text, with a variable, in this case b. So what I'm doing here is I'm counting down from 10 to 0, because remember that Python always stops one short, and I'm printing b, which is the number, and then green bottles. So when I run that, we get that result. So it's counting down correctly if you're attempting my task where you program the song. But look what's going on here. It's saying 10 green bottles, 9876, 2 green bottles, and then it says 1 green bottles are hanging on the wall. So as we get more confident in our programming, we probably want to cope with situations like that. So sometimes you see things like this. So you people try and kind of cope with all eventualities by doing this sort of thing. And obviously that makes it look like you've thought about it at least, but it makes you look like you've thought about it in a sort of half-hearted manner. So can we do anything to alter this and to get it to correctly add the S for anything other than 1? Because 2 green bottles, that's plural. 1 green bottle, that's obviously singular. 0, well, none, we tend to say no green bottles with an S on the end. So we tend to treat 0 as if it was plural. So one thing we could do, once you've got a bit further with your programming and you've come across the use of if to make a decision, or selection if you're using the GCSE terminology, you can say things like this. You can say if b equals 1, so if it's only the 1, then we'll have the singular version. Otherwise, we'll have the plural version. And so we could have literally different pieces of text. So the singular version is green bottle is, and the plural version is green bottles are. So if I run that, that's done the trick. It says 2 green bottles are hanging, 1 green bottle is hanging, no green bottles are hanging. But look what's happened to our program. It's 5 lines long, whereas previously it was 2 lines long. It's 2.5 times bigger than it was before. So is there any way that we could do that more simply, more concisely? Well, Linus Torvalds, inventor of Linux, I was reading an article by him a couple of years ago, and it said that using if to look for exceptions when you could create a function that always worked is an example of bad taste programming. And that set me to thinking, actually, in a lot of cases, you can avoid the use of if, which makes your program shorter, but it also makes it more readable in some ways. So maybe this individual line wouldn't be more readable, but your whole program looks more concise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some things we already know about Python. So for example, what I already know about Python is that we can multiply text. So if we say A times 6, for example, what we get is 6 lots of A. And you can do that in most programming languages. Sometimes it requires a function, so something like called structcopy or something, but you can generally do it. The other thing you can do is you can multiply by 0, and again, all of those different functions in different languages tend to cope with this. So if you multiply by 0, you actually get nothing. You get an empty string. So we can take that idea. So how many S's we want on the word bottle is either 1 or none. So if we use the multiplying idea, we can multiply by 1 to get an S, or multiply by 0 not to get an S. But where are we going to get the 1 and the 0 from? Well, if we have a look at this comparison up here that we're making, so we're looking to see whether B is 1. And when you do a comparison in Python or any programming language, you get a result of true or false. So at the moment it's saying false. And why is that? Because the value of B is 0. So after a program finishes, most of the variables persist, and you can check their values over here on the right hand side if you're using Replit, or in the kind of immediate window if you're using idle, for example. So B is equal to 1 is false because B is actually 0. So if I said is B 0, we'd say true. But true and false are actually, in most programming languages, effectively a constant. Represents 0 for false and 1 for true. So if I say is false 0, it's true, because Python thinks that false is 0. And if we try and do a multiplication, so if you say what's 3 times false, it's 0. Similarly, if you say is true 1, then it is. And we can do a calculation with that as well. So if we say what's 3 times true, it's 3, because true behaves like 1. So we can take advantage of that. If you're using other programming languages, so JavaScript is the same, true and false are 0 and 1. If you're using Visual Basic, for example, true is -1, but you can still use this idea because you can just multiply the result by -1 or use the abs function to take the value without the sign. Okay, so what we can do is we can combine those two ideas. So if we get a bit of text and multiply it by true, we'll get 1 copy, and if we multiply it by false, we'll get no copies. So what we need to do is we're going to, if we just go back to that original version there. So when do we want an S if it's not equal to 1, don't we? So what I'm going to do is, I can't use a comma here, because if I use a comma, it'll include a space. So I'm going to do concatenation with a plus, but I can use the comma after that point. So what I'm going to include, so I want a number of S's. How many S's do I want? I want to determine whether B, so if B is not equal to 1, so if B isn't equal to 1, that will be true. True is the same as 1, so I'll get 1 S. If B is equal to 1, that will be false. False is 0, so I'll get no S's. So if I run that program now, we can see it does the trick. 10 green bottles, 1 green bottle, no green bottles. So that's done that, and in fact with no extra lines in our code. Our program started off at 2 lines, and now it's still 2 lines. Can we sort out the verb in the same way, so the is or the are? Well, yes we can, because if we're treating true and false as a number, and we're using it for calculation, we can also use it as an index into a tuple or a list. So if I say verb equals, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a tuple, and the difference between a tuple and a list is that a tuple doesn't change. So if it's singular, we currently that value generates a 0. So false and 0 are the same, so we get no S's, but we can also use that 0 as an index here. So verb 0 is, verb 1 is are. So instead of this here, what we're going to do is I'm going to include an extra thing, which is, so I no longer need my is. 1, 2, 3. There we go. What I'm going to include is verb, and then I'm going to use this same condition that I used here. So if I run this now, you can see it says 10 green bottles are, down to 2 green bottles are, 1 green bottle is, and then back to no green bottles are, with no extra lines. So I've done that in 3 lines, so that's quite a saving. That's a 40% saving over using if. But actually, because I only print in one place, I would say that the whole program overall is more readable. So that's taking advantage of the fact that a comparison gives you a true or false answer, but true or false is really 0 or 1, which we can then use in a calculation or as an index into a tuple or a list.